to feel it rain down, feel the rain down, feel the rain down, to feel it rain down, feel it rain down, feel it rain down. Oh, so feel the rain down, feel the rain down, feel the rain down.
You guys, we're back with my very special guest, Kristin Hoffmann, and that was Bring the Rain, a song that we are co-performing and we co-wrote, is on my new record, Inevitably. She's got a gorgeous voice, and we are just blessed to have her here with us today. So we're going to pick it up where we left off last week.
Deborah, do you have a question for Kristin?
Yeah, so I checked out your website and I was really impressed with the range of material that you do and your writing. I couldn't tell, do you do mainly solo and then also working with orchestras, like when you perform?
The past couple years, I've gotten more into classical music again, and so I created the vocals and was singing with a project called Unfolding Secrets with an Italian composer. So for the past few years, I've done a lot of orchestra work. Another one of my songs was just orchestrated last spring. So, there's been a lot more opportunities to work with orchestras again, which I love and which I'm inviting more orchestra opportunities into my world. It's great. But no, I do a whole range of stuff. Even in the past couple of years, I produced a hip hop record, which isn't out yet. But I mean, I've done a lot of different styles, from classical to singer-songwriter to I do sound healing work. So there's a couple records that kind of reflect more of this new age sound healing world, and all the way to this hip hop record, which was a collaboration with a guy in the UK. Sometimes I think in the music industry, having that kind of a range of things that you like to do and express through music can be seen as a downfall, because in the music industry, a lot of times you're pressured to kind of have a certain sound, a certain niche. But for me, I feel that in my path has felt so much more rewarding, and it's just been a much fuller experience because I've been able to experience these different aspects of music. And I think I would have gotten very bored. I know myself. I would have been very bored with just one style. Like, I only play guitar or only play piano and sing songs that are kind of considered singer-songwriter pieces. So I think everyone, you have to listen to what your thing is. But if that answers your question, I like to experiment with it all.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I come from a classical background, and in some senses, I could have, basically where I am is I have a ton of training and a lot of skills, but it's taken me a while to come to singer-songwriter.
Yes.
Because I went to Cal Arts to do like 20th century avant-garde stuff.
Wow.
And I was writing neo-medieval work, kind of like Meredith Monk type stuff. But then it took me a long time to figure out, hey, I like writing 3-minute songs. This is really cool. So now I'm doing it, but then I'm sort of at the beginning. But then with all these skills and having had a job and an income.
Okay, the next question is also from Deborah, but we just got cut out, so here it is. How do you keep the faith of your career going when you're just starting out as a musician? And what are some best practices in dealing with a band?
I've learned to just trust, okay, I want to know it all now, but I'm not meant to know it all yet. And just trusting that each day something new is going to be revealed until you are in that new space where you're like, wow, this is really happening. So, just monitoring your internal voice, I think, is number one. Working with band, changeovers can be really difficult. And bands, once one person kind of destructs, sometimes a whole band can almost self-destruct, because that energy of one person kind of only doing things half-assed can be very infectious, I found, within band situations, Like, I've been in dream band situations where it's like everything's going so well for a year, and then that kind of little seed of, somebody's own personality that might not even have anything to do with the band starts coming out as like the seed of frustration. And then suddenly, it plays out in the whole band scene. And then the next thing I know, I'm like, oh gosh, this just isn't working. What am I going to do? And there's the whole drama. So I think if you're feeling that, I've learned that it can be painful to transition between bands, and you feel that there's so many you don't want to hurt people's feelings, and it's so hard to be like straight and upfront with people when things are just not working out. But yet, what I've learned is like just being honest and straightforward. Some people don't like that, the day of, but then usually within a few days to a week to a year, they come around. It's all okay, and you can be friends in most situations. So just if you feel that, usually, I've found that a lot of times I know when it's time to move on from a band for months before I actually make the move. It's like this latency. And so if you really feel that and it's been going on for a little while, just listen to yourself and just know know that if you have the courage to just confront it, it's all going to dissipate quickly, and it will open up, a wonderful new space for you to create in a new capacity. I used to always play with larger bands. Like I had 5-piece bands for most of my 20s, 4 or 5-piece bands. As I got into my 30s, I started to play solo again, and I really started to feel the power of going back to my roots of playing solo. And then eventually there's a man who's been playing with me. I found one multi-instrumentalist who he's played hundreds, a couple hundred shows with me at this point. And having that one trusted person who really gets my music, who can kind of mesh between a few different instruments, has been the most incredible sharing experience and musical partnership that I could have ever imagined. So sometimes, we have this grandiose vision of what our music sounds like, but yet it can be expressed on a smaller sharing magical capacity with one person, and maybe that's a great way to start, is to try to find that one person, because usually a one-on-one relationship is easier to manage for a certain time when you're doing it, in a transition phase, than suddenly jumping into having 4 people, 5 people working with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And once you get that partnership honed in, then sometimes, finding additional players can then be a much simpler process to just enhance what you've already created. I think that's key, is finding 1 or 2 trusted people that really resonate with you to share with, and trying to get it so that it's great at that point. And then when it's your time to enhance, then do that. That's what I found, at least for me. I don't know, Cheryl, you've had a band for a long, long time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that you get this vision, and I've done like string quartets with my bass, drum, guitar, like the 3 regular guys that I've been playing with since 2006, and I've done horn sections. I'm like, let's see how big this thing can get, and it's like, sometimes that totally feels right, and that's like the energy and where I am. It takes a lot to manage. It's expensive, because I am of the school of thought that everyone deserves to be paid for their work, and even though there are people willing to do favors, at some point those run out. So yeah, that whole thing, a lot to manage, it takes a lot of focus. I have loved doing, my guitar player can do awesome stuff on organs and keyboards and stuff, so we've done a couple duet, maybe bring in a percussionist, and those shows, they always sort of feel the same. I always expect them to feel small and insignificant, and they just don't. I think there really is something to that partnership, especially now where I am now. I haven't been touring the last 2 years, and looking forward to the next shows. If I'm going to do something, it's going to I have a friend who's a choreographer and wants to choreograph his dance troupe to a show of of my music, and that's interesting to me, and bringing in strings for that, or and I connect still with the band, but it's more on let's do a track or record, and it's more of in a studio session, just because they're also sort of taken off and gone to their own heights and are really busy too. So I'm like, they were great, and I love them, and they're like my brothers, but do I want to go try to find that again when I'm not really having that same kind of touring bug? So for me, it is who do I want to work with on creating the music? It's coming back to a more on a creation level for me, creating the record, creating the productions,
creating the scores and who do I want to be in the room with and like get vulnerable with versus the performance, which is sort of the other end once the songs are done. There is still a huge level of creation, but I'm just in a different place right now where performing is not on my radar. But I would say that exploring Deborah, I know that you've explored working with that band, and I think that's not to say that, okay, bands are not for you. That one band didn't end up working out. I went through 2 iterations of a band before I landed with the guys that I was with for 10 years, or 7 years, whatever. So not to say that that's not the thing, but I would definitely try finding that multi-instrumentalist partnership. I think that would lend itself well to your music and what you're doing. But also maybe, okay, let's build that. Maybe that person knows something, or maybe just do one show where you arrange for strings if that's interesting to you. Play around with it and see what sticks, and you also get to see your music in new lights. So, but I agree with Kristin on everything she said too.
Especially, Deborah, if you play piano as well, that's, when you work with another musician, then between piano and whatever else they are playing, it can really sound full and whatnot. Another thing that I found that is very helpful, and I implement this into all my shows, is I create backing tracks on Pro Tools for some of my songs. So I will, between the backing tracks that maybe are strings and a cool drum beat, or maybe it's a bass line, I'll have that playing for some songs, and I have my iPad on stage where I trigger that. And then between me and Premik, who is the multi-instrumentalist, then it sounds really full. And so I'm able to still guide the audience on this journey that feels like they're experiencing a full band, but it's an illusion, right? Mm-hmm. And especially for strings, it can be really nice. The one thing you need to have in place if you're going to use backing tracks is obviously a rhythmic beat so that you can stay on track. Just having strings can get a little mushy if you're trying to stay in alignment with them. But if you have like a drum beat and strings, and then you're going to work with a flute player and piano, it can sound really, really beautiful and still just be the two of you. So that's definitely something to consider.
Awesome. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, good. That was a good conversation. I'm psyched about that one. So I have a question from someone who can't be on the call today about how you, Kristin, sort of generate the opportunities. Are you at a point in your career where they just sort of show up, or I call those the waiting for the phone to ring gigs, which a lot of my commercial and film work is, versus like what's the percentage? And I'm sort of now phrasing this into my own question. What's the percentage of what you go out to get? And when you say I got this TV placement or that, like, where are you actually generating those opportunities, or are you just, you've gotten to a point where you're waiting for the phone to ring?
Well, I think there's a full spectrum there of what I'm experiencing. In some areas, I feel that I am at a point where things are really generating. Usually what I find is I'll go play one show. So like I just played in Mount Fuji, and then by playing that show and really being open while I'm there to meeting people and to conversing and to making new friendships, a lot of times at least 1 or 2 new opportunities will come out of an experience like that. So already I'm going back to Japan this summer, which was kind of unrelated, but yet related at the same time, because when I went to Japan, I was able to have a meeting with them. So it was like this kind of seed that had come up, and before I went this time, where I had been contacted about this possibility. But then when I went to Japan, I followed through and I set up a meeting, and I created a wonderful relationship while I was there with a new organization, and then now about a month later, it has come through to a new opportunity to play. So, I think every opportunity you do have to play, just going in with a very open mindset and using that as an opportunity to really cement certain friendships and relationships again, right? It's like if people come out to support you, just really being as present as possible with them. A lot of times that person will then be thinking of you 2 months down the road when something comes up in their lives where they need music or they need you to come play at a party they're having or, whatnot. So I feel like in my life at this point, there is an element of like every month, 1 or 2 opportunities are coming to me naturally. And then there's this other mix of generating usually through that vehicle of those opportunities so that down the road it comes back. But then, that's more like live performance and traveling and whatnot to play. In the areas of licensing and getting my music into films and whatnot, I really do go up and down. I realize that that's a whole other world. And Cheryl, you've done a lot more with it. I've had times where I do more with it, but that's usually when somebody else has been helping me with it. And in terms of trying to get into the world of licensing and film, it's something that I've had a deep desire to do, but it takes a lot of time and energy in generating new relationships, because usually I found in the music world that everything is kind of partitioned.
Yeah.
Live performance and playing live is one area. Working with record labels is another area. Teaching and education and leading workshops, that's kind of another area. Film and licensing is another area. Working on commercials is like kind of even another world. So there's all these different worlds within one larger world, right? And every time I want to get into one of the other worlds that maybe I haven't been working on as much, it feels like Deborah's new beginning all over again. So I have been, in that place of feeling in the new beginning again in terms of getting into film. I really want it to happen. And sometimes I kick myself like, you can't just wait for the phone to call, or, the phone to ring. It's not going to just happen magically. Like, even though the phone is ringing in other elements of life, don't assume that it just applies to film and licensing. Like, I have to figure out ways to generate that. Maybe it's, I think for me at this point, it's finding somebody to help me, who is more of a pro in those areas, who can guide me. I need to learn. And so I'm very aware that there's a lot of learning to be had in that area. So, I think it's always a mix, right? We can't focus on all the different areas at once. So even though you might really be generating some good motion in one area, it doesn't mean that it translates into all aspects of music, right? Yeah. So you kind of have to be clear about what you want to pick, and I think focus on it, and maybe bring in little bits from other realms of music. Like at this point, I'm live music is flowing. I have a teaching business that's really going well, and that's flowing. And then I have one new element that I'm working on, which is the film. So that's my project. That's my place that I'm planting seeds, you could say. But obviously, I think if I was to spread myself any thinner than that, it would probably start being a downfall for me. Yeah. Does that kind of help? Or
yeah, no, I think that's really insightful, and I love the different worlds. And there for me, there's always a little overlap, and I always felt like if one of those worlds really took off, like if you're working with a label, then the licensing is just going to help, or vice versa, or if you get a ton of commercials, you're going to be able to fund your record better, and you do the PR. So there definitely is a little overlap, but they are at the same time separate. And it is a balancing game. Like right now I'm working on a lot on my fourth record, which I say is my new record. And it feels like it's my first record because everything's different. I haven't written a record, and my last one came out 2011. So it's totally the rebirth of what do we do now? Oh, I was not tweeting when my last record came out. Like now I'm like, oh, this is like a new, this is so new for me. And I sort of feel like I'm on that journey. And, last year I rebranded my composing company to really sort of find my own niche clients. So I didn't have to wait for ad agencies to call me. And but that has sort of fallen, I've got my clients that I do some sonic branding for, little sonic logos and stuff. And I have some stuff out there just to be found, but I'm put that on the back burner. So I'm waiting for the phone to ring. Even though last year I was really, really aggressive about going out and getting new clients, because right now I'm in this world of artists. And last year I wasn't even thinking of myself as an artist, as a singer-songwriter. I was like, I might be done with that. But it's not. Yeah. It sort of creeps up. All of this artists, no matter what you're doing, if you're teaching or writing for commercials or films, the artist sort of creeps up. You've got to get that out. So I totally feel that it's an ebb and flow, and you're wearing multiple hats, but at any given time, multitasking is such a funny term because you're not actually doing two things at once. You're just switching really quickly from one focus to another. People that are multitasking, checking email and on Facebook and like about to get on a conference call, when you're focusing on the email, you're actually there. You might have other things open, but you're not literally doing all three at the same time. So I think my career is sort of the same way. Like, I'd like to say that I'm multitasking, but at any given moment, like right now, I'm like totally into this call and this course and, you know, providing value and learning myself and all this stuff. And then like in 2 hours, I got to switch and, prep some tracks to send to my drummer to record for the record. So it's like, it's a multitasking, but it's also, it's the ebb and flow and choosing the worlds and getting where your strengths are. And like, I wish my strengths were in some places. So I used to work really hard at that. But then when it comes time to pay the rent, it's like, what is working and do more of that. As long as it's in line with what I love and all that stuff. And I'm assuming right now we're all at the point where we're doing a bunch of different things that we love. And it's like, okay, this month I might have to put a little more into the commercial work because I know that will pay better. And so, it's
well, I think you
juggling.
brought up one of the key points that we haven't touched on quite yet. And that is, how do you find the balance within, like, let's say you're doing music full time, but how do you find the balance between the elements of your musical expression that are paying the bills, but maybe are not your full artistic dream expression, right?
Yeah.
And then the time and space to nurture and work on the other aspects of your musical expression and growth that are really rewarding. And how do you create that balance and still feel like, you're not being bogged down by the parts that are the more survival based elements, right? Like for me, I never thought I was going to teach music ever. Like if you had talked to me when I was in my early 20s, it was not on my horizon at all. I thought that the major label thing was going to totally pan out and, had a totally different plan. Down the road, the teaching aspect came to me. It was the phone ringing like multiple times. And I was like, what's going on? And I started teaching at a school of rock. And it ended up teaching me so much. Like, I mean, I was able to work with the kids and have a great experience. But, like, I learned so much about giving back, about sharing. I learned that, sharing what I had gathered through music with the next generations was an important part of my own growth process as an artist. And I became a better musician through teaching. So, and the phone it was funny, like one teaching gig would kind of come to a place where I was like, I'm not really feeling, this is my third year working at the School of Rock. Like, I'm going to take, I feel like it's time to take a break. And then suddenly the phone would ring and it's like, I have 21 students and I'm moving to Europe. Can you take over teaching piano? And then I jumped into that world. And then right when I was kind of feeling overwhelmed, like this is taking too much of my time, I got a notice like, this school is going to close. And originally I thought, this is horrible. And then I realized, no, this is a great blessing in disguise. I can teach less days and I can pick my 10 favorite students and just go teach privately. And it'll be like a third of the time commitment. It'll open up so much more space for me to work on my own music. And I'm going to be able to make twice as much as I was making through teaching at this school. So, teaching, oh my gosh, it's been like the most unexpected blessing in disguise in many ways. And yet a challenge to learn how to balance getting bogged down with teaching so much that then I'm tired and I don't have the energy to put into my own creative processes. But yet teaching, when I look at it every year when I pay my taxes, the teaching element is paying for half of my music. It's really paying like half of my bills. Yeah. So, and it's very rewarding on many levels. It's a juggling experience. I cut off one day from teaching 2 years ago. So now I teach Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and I just teach about 4 to 5 hours a day. And the rest of the time I dedicate to my own music career. And, not that teaching is not part of that career, but you know what I mean? My own creative endeavors. And, it's about the balance. Now I'm considering next year, I'm at that point where I'm like, even the 3 days a week I'm realizing this whole year that's really starting to get in the way of some of my own ability to travel when I need to travel and whatnot. So I'm either thinking to cut it down one more day or try to morph into the next expression, whatever that may be. Maybe it's teaching master classes. Maybe it's doing one private lesson a month in a master class. Who knows? But it's like learning to listen to the survival part and balancing it with the creative part.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. You and I are like in the same place teaching. Like teaching was always sort of like my version of a waitressing job. Like it was like sort of flexible, like kind of, you know, as long as I had the relationships. And I have been teaching for like 11 years on and off. And when I got married and moved, I sent an email to like a couple of the music teachers at the middle schools and high schools and was like, listen, I'm available. And nothing sort of showed up for a couple of months. And now I have 10 students. They kept like 2 years later, like they just started sending them to me. And I really pick my favorite ones that practice, and I'm really expensive. And I do it only on 2 days. And they have to come to me, and I totally like have all these parameters. And I was in the same question, like, is this considered a day job if I cut this out? Or is this part of me doing 100% of my income through music? And I mean, teaching voice and piano for me is like absolutely part of that. And like, I never knew my scales until I started teaching that. Like, yes, it got so much better as a musician for sure. But the thing that you asked a perfect question, and the answer that just popped in my head is like, how do you have that to be in line? Like in the MX4 class, in the first week, we do a bunch of exercises to get really clear on what our commitment is. And it's like in the form of one statement. And it's really answers the question, like, who are you? What are you up to? And it has nothing to do with what you're doing. And for me, I got over the past couple of years, like mine is all about self-expression through creativity and partnership. And I realized that even though I was doing these teaching, the self-expression wasn't present for them. It was kind of present for me. I got to say what I wanted to. And there's definitely not like a partnership, and they weren't really creating. So this year in January, I was like, oh my God, I should host a recital. And I just did it. It was actually last weekend. And some of the kids, played guitar and played with themselves, like accompanying themselves. Some kids did some vocal percussions. I have an 87-year-old student. They all sang Hey Jude at the end together. Some of them had never met. And it was just so fun. My little like twins were like little deer and headlights at the piano. They just couldn't play anything. I was like, this is so fun. And so much more in line with what I'm committed to. And so the question of like how to balance the thing I don't really want to do with the stuff I really do want to do, I'm like, well, I'm going to keep doing this. I might as well make this one of the things I really want to do. And what can I change in that to sort of manipulate it? So that's sort of what I did this year, is manipulate the teaching and create a structure that makes it work. And the teaching could get out of hand. I get more students and I meet that. So I have to schedule, and these guys know I'm like a schedule Nazi. Like I have to schedule in the time to sit down and write. I have to schedule the time to like prep the drum tracks. And if I schedule the time to do the stuff that I really love but may not be paying the bills right the second, the way a teaching lesson will hand you the cash, like if I'm scheduling that, then I know I trust myself to do what my schedule says. And that's I think that's for me how I find the balance, is like manipulating the things that I know I should be doing and that really are good for me, to sort of create a new context around them, and then scheduling what I know I love to do, like at the peak of the love, and making those two. So that's sort of my way of finding the balance. But yeah, I think the last thing, Kristin, that I heard in what you said is like, you also were so open to like having that teaching experience, like be something that contributes to you. And I think a lot of musicians out there, like you are very skilled musicians, and to be able to go share that and see what opens up versus I'm doing this to get a paycheck, like that sort of puts the blinders on it. And you were really open to that. I think that's important.
Yeah. You have to be like, when you're choosing, when I was just in Japan, I relearned a very important lesson. Everybody who is doing a job, whether it be at the front desk of a hotel or driving a car or serving food at a restaurant, there's such a pride that's taken in daily work, and all work seems to be shared with such graciousness and presence. And I was reminded about that, like, wow, that's really the missing piece in our American kind of society. And I feel that with myself too. Sometimes, you're going through so much and you're exhausted, and teaching can become that thing, or whatever your survival music job is, it can become that thing where you're just like in it, and you're like, oh, when is this going to be done? And so the Japanese experience a couple weeks ago reminded me, to be present and to really just appreciate and give the best to what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And usually when I embody that kind of energy with teaching and with, or I used to play at a hotel. That was another money making survival job. And sometimes I'd be sitting at the hotel and I'd be like, nobody is listening right now. I might as well be a fly on the wall. And, but when I would really go and be present to it and just say, oh, this is my paid practice session, and I'm going to use this as a way to work on my new songs and enhance my own creativity. When I would really get into it and do my best, then I could really appreciate it more and also feel that my time wasn't being wasted, that I was actually enjoying the fruits of my labor, even though it wasn't as enjoyable for me as the kind of fantasy expression, right?
Right. On stage with 4,000 people listening to you, you can hear a pin drop in the room, right? But there's so many levels of that. Like some people would kill to have a hotel gig that pays, and then there's like session singing, for jingles. People would kill for that, and then they're like, oh, I got to go to another session instead of performing live, or maybe like everyone's got their own iteration of that. But the big picture is like you're creating music, you're sharing that with other people. So, everyone listening in, I know we all get a chance to call ourselves lucky on some level. So, this is perfect timing. Kristin, I can't thank you enough for being here with us. And Deborah and Scott from the MX4 course, thank you for participating in your awesome questions and your listening. Everyone can go check out Kristin and see where she's playing. It's KristinHoffmann.com, 2 I's, 2 F's, 2 N's.
Got it.
Right? KristinHoffmann.com.
It's like a major pet peeve because I never get the second N.
I know.
Do people spell your, I'm sure you guys all have experienced this.
Yeah, no.
The second N is always left off. And I'm like, here we go again.
Yeah. Totally have that problem. But yeah, this has been really insightful. And go check out Kristin. Go to her live shows. You will be in for such a treat.
All right, next week we're going to be talking with Eitan Rosenblum of ASCAP. He is going to dive in with all things licensing, performing rights organization related, and really get some insight into how to get paid. You don't want to miss this one. We'll see you next week. Please don't forget to rate and comment on iTunes and Stitcher Radio if you like this podcast. It's the best way to keep it going, get more subscribers, and continue to share this awesome information with the indie music community. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. All of the music on this podcast has been created by yours truly. The theme song is called Inevitably, written with Cameron Ernst and produced by Joey Ock. You can find all the songs, plus more information on my music career at CherylBE.com. If you want to be one of the reasons I can keep this podcast and my blog Living on Gigging going, then head to patreon.com/CBEmusic. There, you can contribute $1, $2, $5 for the creation of each of these free musician resources. Together, we can keep them coming and inspire other creative people to do what they love and do it well. Again, that's patreon.com/CBEmusic. Key Conversations is sponsored in part by Bandzoogle. They make it easy to build a beautiful website for your music. Their step-by-step system gets you online in minutes, and you can choose from hundreds of mobile-friendly themes and customize them with their easy point-and-click editor. All the features you could possibly imagine for a professional website are built in. So, because you are a Key Conversations podcast listener, you get a special 3-month free trial just for you. Go to www.inthekeyofsuccess.com/resources and click on the Bandzoogle logo to access your free extended trial.